Episode 1 Wolf Moon. To kick this one off, we are introduced to high school best friends Scott McCall and Stiles Stilinski. They are your everyday, regular high school boys, and not really anything special about them, at least not yet. Stiles asks Scott to come look in the woods for a dead body he thinks is out there because he overheard his sheriff father talking about it. Scott has really bad asthma, but decides to go with Stiles anyway. When they get out there, animals start going wild, they get split up, and Scott drops his inhaler. While looking for it, he is attacked by a creature that looks like a huge wolf, but thankfully runs away with only a scratch on his stomach. The next day at school, his asthma is gone, and he starts developing new traits he's never had before, like super advanced smelling and hearing. He then meets Allison Argent, who is a new girl at their school, and he falls in love with her at first sight. A little later, Scott tells Stiles about the wolf bite and his new abilities, and Stiles immediately believes Scott was bitten by a werewolf, but Scott says they don't exist. On the way home from school, they run into Derek Hale, who tells them they are on private property and to leave, and Stiles tells Scott that Derek's whole family died in a fire 10 years ago. The following day, Stiles and Scott try out for the lacrosse team, and Scott is suddenly awesome at the sport, even though he used to suck, and the captain of the team, Jackson Whitmore, thinks Scott is on steroids. That weekend, Scott takes Allison to a house party, but it is a full moon and Scott starts to feel the effects of being a werewolf and he believes Stiles now. Scott then rushes home before anyone can see him turn into a wolf, which upsets Allison because he ditched her. At home, he turns into a werewolf and thinks Derek Hale is the werewolf that scratched him. Stiles then tells Scott that Derek drove Allison home from the party, and this angers Scott. Scott goes to confront Derek in the woods, and Derek tries to calm him down and says he is on his side, and then werewolf hunters show up trying to kill them. And then it is revealed that the leader of the werewolf hunters is Chris Argent, who just so happens to be Allison's dad. Episode 2 Second Chance at First Line. The episode begins at lacrosse practice, and Scott starts turning into a werewolf and is unable to control it, so Stiles rushes him to the locker room to calm down. Scott tells his coach he doesn't know if he can play in their first game Friday, as he doesn't want to shift in front of the whole crowd, but everyone is excited to watch him play, including Allison and his mom. His coach tells him he is playing. In class, we meet popular girl Lydia Martin, who is actually dating Jackson, but Stiles has been in love with her since the first grade. She doesn't even know he exists. Stiles wants to investigate Derek a little more because he believes Derek is responsible for the deaths that have been happening around the town. They sneak onto his property and find a dead body buried by his house, and then Derek is arrested by Stiles' father, Sheriff Noah Stilinski, the next day. Later that night, when Scott transforms to a werewolf, he goes to Allison's house and is almost caught spying on her, so he jumps off the roof and then is hit by Argent's car, but luckily his glowing eyes and fangs went away before Chris Argent saw. Allison comes out and introduces them to each other. That Friday comes, but Scott is still hesitant to play because he hasn't learned how to control when he transforms between werewolf and human. As the game goes on, Scott's glowing eyes continue to flash on and off. Scott completely dominates the game, and when the buzzer sounds, he sprints off to the school locker room and Allison follows him. He turns into a werewolf and looks like he is about to attack her, but controls himself and transforms back into a human, and Allison finds him in the showers. They then share their first kiss. After she leaves, Stiles tells Scott the police didn't have enough to hold Derek in jail, and he was released. The episode closes with Derek staring at Jackson on the lacrosse field when Jackson notices Scott's ripped lacrosse glove. Episode 3 Pack Mentality. This episode begins with a dream sequence of Scott killing Allison on a school bus as a werewolf. When he wakes up, he thinks that is all it was, but when he gets to school, he sees a yellow bus with blood and a huge hole in it. Scott then frantically searches for Allison, and he finally finds her alive and well. It was just a dream after all. Scott does think Derek is responsible for whatever happened with the school bus. After school, Scott heads to his job where he is a veterinarian assistant, and the sheriff comes in and says there was a wolf attack the night prior, and he is there to ask for the vet, Alan Deaton's professional opinion. A little later, Scott goes to Derek's house to confront him about the attack he just heard about. Derek says he didn't do anything, but thinks Scott might have in the middle of the night, and he just doesn't remember doing it. Scott then pleads with Derek to show him how to control himself as a werewolf. Scott heads back to the bus where he remembers being there as a werewolf the night before, and he really hopes he didn't hurt anyone. On Friday night, Allison and Scott go double-date bowling with Lydia and Jackson makes fun of Scott the whole time until Scott starts dominating him at bowling. We then jump over to Derek, who is at a gas station, and then Argent and his hunting crew show up to intimidate him, and then leave. The man that was attacked the night prior dies in the hospital, and then Scott goes to Derek's house, as he is sure Derek killed him. An intense fight sequence happens, and then Derek tells Scott he didn't bite him earlier in the season, it was an alpha. Derek tells Scott they are betas, but they need to work together to bring down the alpha before he kills everyone in Beacon Hills. Episode 4. Magic Bullet. To open this episode, we meet Kate Argent, Allison's aunt, and she is driving to the Argent's house, but then the alpha werewolf taunts her until she scares him away with a shotgun. Kate is a hunter as well, and she came to town to help Argent kill the alpha, Derek and any other werewolves in town. Derek arrives to search for the alpha, but is shot by Kate with a silver bullet and left to die. The following day, Derek arrives at the high school looking for Scott, but runs into Jackson first. It gets a little heated, and Derek slices the back of Jackson's neck with his nails. Derek looks to be dying and collapses in the parking lot and tells Scott he was shot with a silver bullet. Derek needs Scott to go to the Argent's house and steal one of the bullets, as it can heal him too. Once there, he is invited to stay for dinner. Argent and Kate have no idea Scott is a werewolf to this point. Derek is with Stiles, and they call Scott to tell him they need the bullet as soon as possible and he will die without it. And without Derek, they'll have no chance at killing the alpha. Scott says to meet him at the animal clinic in an hour, and then Scott finds the bullet he believes is what Derek needs. Scott eventually leaves the Argent house to go to the clinic where Derek is about to cut off his arm so the infection doesn't reach his heart. Scott arrives and gives the bullet to Derek. Derek then burns the bullet down and uses the ashes to put on his bullet wound, and then it heals immediately. Derek then takes Scott to meet his uncle Peter, who was the only survivor in the house fire that the Argents started years ago, killing 11 people. Peter hasn't spoke since the incident, and half his face is burned off. Derek is trying to show Scott how dangerous and ruthless the Argents can be, and how it's not a good idea to date Allison. The episode ends with Kate and Argent planning how to kill Derek and the Alpha. Episode 5. The Tell. Jackson goes into the movie store to rent a movie, and Lydia stays in the car, but then the Alpha werewolf shows up inside and intimidates Jackson. The Alpha sees the nail wound on the back of Jackson's neck that he got from Derek and rushes out of the building. We then jump to Derek telling Scott they have no choice but to work together if they want to bring down the Alpha, who is pretty much a serial killer at this point. At school the following day, we meet chemistry teacher Mr. Harris, who seems to favor Jackson over others, and is very suspect to say the least. In the school locker room, Derek confronts Jackson about what he saw at the movie store, but he says it was just a mountain lion. Jackson definitely seems to be terrified of what he saw, though. Meanwhile, Scott doesn't take Derek's advice, and continues to hang out with Allison and grow closer together. Stiles goes over to Lydia's house to ask her if she saw anything at the movie store the night prior, but she says she closed her eyes. She passes out drunk, and when Stiles looks at her phone, he sees a video of the Alpha leaving the store. Kate and a few other hunters go over to Derek's house and she tases him, but he is able to get away before they can kill him. The sheriff has security footage of the movie store incident, and he takes screenshots to Alan Deaton to ask what creature he thinks it could be, because he's not buying it's a mountain lion. Mountain lions can't walk upright like this animal did. But Deaton doesn't have an answer either. Scott and Allison head to the school for parent-teacher conferences, and outside of the school, everyone starts going crazy because of an animal, and then Argent shoots the animal dead. Coincidentally enough, it is actually a mountain lion. Episode 6. Heart Monitor. The episode opens up with Derek trying to help Scott learn how to control his ability to transform and the anger he experiences while a werewolf. Derek once again tells Scott he really shouldn't be dating an Argent and that it just complicates everything, but Scott says he's in love. Meanwhile, Allison has no idea werewolves even exist, but she is naturally good with a bow and arrow, so Kate wants to start teaching her the family business, but Chris Argent says she isn't ready. After sneaking out from Allison's house one night, Scott is chased by the Alpha into his car, and then the Alpha draws a swirling symbol on the window and leaves. Kate secretly gave Allison a book that is based on werewolves and wants her to read it without actually telling her about the supernatural. Allison gets really into it and is deeply fascinated once she gets started. After school, Stiles helps Scott work on controlling his emotions during lacrosse, and as they are practicing, Jackson notices them and he just knows Scott McCall is definitely hiding something, because you don't randomly get great at everything overnight like he did. Jackson also appears to be dealing with some supernatural things of his own as something with claws tries climbing out of his mouth. He just knows whatever is happening to him is because of the cuts on his neck. Derek heads to the hospital to try and talk to Peter, but once again, Peter is mute and doesn't say anything. Derek thinks Peter might know who the Alpha is, but he can't get Peter to talk or even move. Derek then goes to the animal clinic to confront Deaton as he believes he knows more than he lets on, and then Scott shows up to have Deaton's back, and he's finally learning how to control his transformations. Scott, Stiles, and Derek then go to the high school where they want to lure the Alpha out to try and kill him. The Alpha shows up and claws Derek from behind and throws him around like a rag doll while Stiles and Scott sprint into the school. Episode 7. Night School. The Alpha starts chasing them around the school and a janitor finds them and tells them to leave, but then the Alpha kills the janitor with relative ease. Allison knows Scott is at the school, but he isn't responding, so she goes to the school with Jackson and Lydia to figure out what is going on. Inside, Scott and Stiles manage to trap the Alpha in one of the classrooms until it breaks through the ceiling tiles. Allison, Jackson, and Lydia eventually find Scott and Stiles, but then the Alpha starts chasing them all, and they barricade themselves inside another classroom. Allison begs Scott to tell them what is going on, and Scott says it is Derek trying to kill them, but they are confused because Derek Hale is a human, not an animal. It's not hard to put 2 and 2 together, though. Lydia makes Scott a Molotov cocktail to go use and confront the Alpha while the others stay behind in the room. Scott goes into the gymnasium where he grabs the janitor's keys, and then the Alpha shows up. Scott throws the Molotov cocktail at him, but it doesn't work, and then the Alpha pins him down to the ground, roars, and then just disappears. As this happens, Jackson gets an extreme headache and Stiles sees the marks on the back of his neck. In the gym, Scott goes into werewolf mode and he has to think of Allison to try and control his emotions so he doesn't hurt anyone. The cops then show up and the Alpha is gone, but the kids tell the police they don't know who or what killed the janitor. Scott then tells Stiles that he believes the Alpha doesn't want to kill him, he wants Scott to be a part of his pack and do his killing for him. He was tempting him tonight. The episode closes with Allison breaking up with Scott because she knows he is hiding something. Episode 8. Lunatic. The episode opens with another attack from the Alpha in the woods, which causes the sheriff to mandate a town-wide curfew at night. The police are also looking for Derek as he is a suspect in the janitor's death. Scott is still heartbroken, Allison broke up with him and she ignores him at school. Weird things also start happening to him, and he thinks it is a result of the Alpha attack, and feels like the Alpha can almost control his thoughts. Scott is terrified the Alpha will make him really kill someone. At school, Jackson broke up with Lydia because they were growing apart, but it was really so he could try getting with Allison, and when he starts hardcore flirting with her, Lydia and Scott get extremely jealous. They end up kissing each other just to get back at Allison and Jackson. Afterwards, Scott is mad at himself for kissing the girl his best friend is in love with, though. That night at the Argent house, Allison and Kate are talking, and Allison says she misses Scott. But he has never been the same since Scott started hanging out with Derek, and this piques Kate's interest because she obviously knows Derek is a werewolf. Stiles arrives at Scott's house and cuffs Scott to a heater in his room because he knows a full moon will be out tonight, and Stiles thinks the Alpha might control Scott to go do his killing. He doesn't want Scott to leave his room at all. Scott gets an evil look in his eye and he tells Stiles that he made out with Lydia, which pisses Stiles off. Meanwhile, Allison and Jackson hang out, and Allison wants to figure out what really attacked them in the school that night because she knows it wasn't Derek, at least not human Derek. Allison theorizes about a werewolf that she read about in the book Kate gave her, and Jackson realizes that's how Scott got good at lacrosse. At his house, Scott breaks free from the cuffs and jumps out the window before Stiles can realize he's even gone. He goes to the school where he sees Jackson and Allison talking, and before he can attack them, Derek shows up and fights him off. Derek then takes him home and tells Scott he can reverse being a werewolf if he kills the one that bit him, but they need to work together to make it happen. Episode 9. Wolf's Bane. This one opens at the school where Mr. Harris is packing his things up, but a lizard-looking creature starts talking to him, but then Derek shows up and the creature disappears. The cops then flash their lights and start chasing Derek off the property, and the Argents aren't far behind, but they're there to kill Derek, not arrest him. Derek is able to get away whenever Scott and Stiles pick him up and speed off. The following day, Jackson approaches Scott and says he's done his research and he knows that Scott is a werewolf, and Jackson orders Scott to make him one too, or he'll tell Allison what he is, or even worse, kill her, and he walks off. Meanwhile, Derek has enlisted Scott to steal Allison's necklace because he needs it, but every time Scott tries getting close to Allison, she pushes him away as they're broken up. Throughout the school day, Jackson knows that Scott has crazy good hearing and whispers what he will do to Allison if Scott doesn't make Jackson a werewolf too, and Scott doesn't know what to do. After school, Scott sneaks into Allison's room at her house and finally steals the necklace, but is caught by Argent on his way out. Argent asks Scott how he knows Derek Hale and why they talk with each other so often if Derek graduated many years ago. Scott just says they are family friends and then he leaves for his lacrosse game. While Scott is playing, Stiles and Derek are investigating a phone call they received the night prior and they trace it back to the hospital, but when Stiles goes inside, Peter isn't there and Derek realizes Peter has been the alpha this whole time. Peter then pops out behind a wall and says, "You must be Stiles," scaring the hell out of Stiles. Derek then comes into the hospital and gets into a fight with Peter, but Peter being an alpha, he's just much stronger than Derek. Peter has been using the last few years to completely heal and then become strong enough to go build his pack, and he offers Derek a spot considering their family. The episode closes at the lacrosse game where Kate and Argent notice the nail scab on the back of Jackson's neck, and they theorize he may be the other beta out there. Episode 10. Co-Captain. After the lacrosse game, Scott goes into the showers only to be met by Peter and Derek. Scott now knows who the alpha is as well. Peter says Scott will be in his pack, and if he's not, Peter will kill everyone close to him, including Stiles and Allison. The following day, Argent talks to Jackson and asks him about the scar on his neck, but Jackson says it happened in lacrosse practice. Jackson now knows the Argents are werewolf hunters as well, and the last thing he wants is them hunting him. Scott and Stiles then arrive to make sure Jackson doesn't spill the beans about him being a werewolf. Jackson says he will keep quiet, but he wants to be one, and Scott says it's not as awesome as Jackson thinks it is. And Scott thinks only alphas can bite to make werewolves, not betas, or else Jackson's scratch from Derek would have made him one. Later that day, Scott and Allison finally make up with one another and decide to give it another shot, but Allison still knows Scott is hiding something from her. That weekend, Scott's mom tells him she's going on a date, but when the date arrives, it is none other than Peter trying to show Scott how serious he is about his pack. At the school, Jackson is working out until Derek comes and talks to him, and Derek says they want Jackson to be a part of their pack. They don't know that Kate is right there listening in on their conversation, though. Derek then leads Jackson to his house out in the woods and sends him inside to get what he desires. Scott then shows up and fights with Derek before he can turn Jackson into a werewolf. The Argents then show up and start spraying bullets inside the house, and one of them hits Scott. Derek goes out to confront the hunters, and Scott escapes out of the back and passes out. Later, Scott wakes up in the vet clinic where he is being treated by Deaton. The episode closes with Kate showing Allison a dungeon in their basement, and they have Derek tied up, and Allison finally realizes werewolves are real. Episode 11. Formality. Allison is in shock after finding out werewolves exist, and Kate explains that their family are werewolf hunters and have been for decades. Kate wants Allison's help in finding the second beta, who Kate believes is Jackson. Meanwhile, Scott is freaking out because he doesn't know what happened to Derek, and he's afraid he might be dead. A formal dance is taking place that next weekend, but Scott can't go because his grades are bad, so he begs Jackson to go with Allison and keep her safe. Stiles also convinced Lydia to go with him. In the dungeon, Kate is trying to torture Derek into talking about the other beta, but he is keeping quiet. Kate then theorizes Scott is the other beta because he is in love with Allison, and that's why he's been trying so hard to protect her. The night of the dance comes and everyone arrives, even Scott, and he's going to try sneaking in even though he's not supposed to be there. He just wants to make sure Peter stays away from Allison. He sneaks in and dances with Allison while Lydia dances with Stiles, which elates him. Jackson goes outside to get fresh air and sees red eyes in the woods. He follows the red dots, and it turns out to be the Argents, with red dot scopes, and not alpha red eyes. Argent now knows that Jackson isn't the second beta werewolf. Lydia goes outside looking for the others, and she is attacked by Peter until Stiles comes out and begs him to stop. Peter wants to know where Derek is, and Stiles says the Argents probably have him locked up, but he will help him find him if he spares Lydia's life. Allison and Scott go outside to get some privacy, but then the werewolf hunters show up and corner Scott. Scott then transforms into a werewolf right in front of Allison and the Argent's eyes. Episode 12. Codebreaker. Season finale. Scott is able to escape before the Argents can kill him. Allison is in complete shock and can't believe what she just witnessed and that she's in love with a werewolf. Argent orders Kate to get Allison and leave the area until all three werewolves are caught because she isn't safe. Scott hides out at the clinic and is heartbroken because he knows he and Allison are probably done. Meanwhile, Stiles continues to help Peter find out where Derek is being held. Peter tells Stiles he will turn him into a werewolf if he wants, but Stiles declines. Scott also starts his own search for Derek and eventually finds him, and they then agree to go finally kill Peter. So pretty much everyone is out searching for Peter to kill him. They end up in the woods where Kate and Allison start shooting silver arrows at Scott and Derek, even though Argent told them to leave the area. Argent then shows up and is mad that Kate brought Allison into this situation. Kate wants to kill Scott, but Argent says they have no proof Scott has taken innocent lives, and he doesn't want to kill a 16-year-old kid who hasn't done anything wrong, werewolf or not. Peter then arrives and all hell breaks loose. Peter captures Kate and then slices her throat with his nails, presumably killing her right in front of Allison. A big werewolf showdown then happens with Scott and Derek trying to take down Peter, and it's complete madness. Everyone works together and Scott lights Peter on fire and lets him burn. Derek then walks up to Peter and slices his throat, which means he killed the alpha, so Derek now has red eyes and is the new alpha. Scott is stuck as a beta because he wasn't the one to kill his biter. The following day, Jackson goes to Derek and begs to be bitten, and then Derek jumps at him. The season closes with Scott and Allison hanging out on top of her house, and Chris Argent is seemingly okay with his daughter dating a werewolf. For now. And that is it for Season 1. We'll get Season 2 uploaded soon, so I hope you can check that season out as well. Thanks for watching!